there, rub-a-dub subs, it's Blackmetalwerewolf making a brand new video for you this week. In today's video, we are going to be talking about influence. I'm sure a lot of metalheads over the years have heard the same line over and over again, that heavy metal has a terrible influence on the minds of children, teens, adults, and so many bands have been accused that their music have influenced people to commit atrocious things. And it always got me thinking that how come every time the subject of influence came up around heavy metal, it was always negative, and no one could ever think of anything positive influence that came from heavy metal. And really, how much influence does heavy metal really have on people? So that is what we are going to be talking about today. So this is something that I've noticed several times throughout my life, and I'm sure plenty of you have heard very similar things. Some sort of horrible atrocity is committed: murder, school shooting, suicide, terrorist attack. And if the perpetrator happens to be a fan of heavy metal, be it a colossal fan of the genre or a fan of one band in particular, certain media outlets will take that very small tidbit of information, and instead of investigating what actually happened, they'll just take that and run with it. This person committed murder because they listened to Slayer, instead of this person with a long history of mental health and a long criminal record committed murder. See, two headlines could mean very different things in the court of public opinion. And I've heard it so many times in my life. I don't feel like it happens as often anymore, but it still does happen. And a lot of times the old articles and stories from the past kind of hold weight today. But I always kind of thought, how much influence does heavy metal really have on the average person? But honestly, the way I figure it, when it comes to, say, murder, suicide, shootings, mass murder, all these kinds of things, I always figured if someone has any sort of mental health problem, be it they're a psychopath, depression, what have you, and they are willing to go to lengths of committing murder or suicide, that no matter what they would have listened to, it was probably going to happen. And I think a lot of people can agree with that statement. A lot of times when they point the finger at heavy metal, they completely ignore every other aspect of this person's life. Now, I'm not going to say that heavy metal can't have an impact, because from my own personal experience, it does. Look at my appearance. Obviously, when I was younger, I saw a lot of these people in heavy metal bands, and they influenced me and made me want to look like them. I saw it, I thought it looked so cool, and I was like, you know what, I really want to look like that. But that is just an aesthetic influence. Me just saying, I think that looks cool, I want to be like that. I never seen someone like Varg Vikernes and be like, hey, that guy's cool, I want to burn down a church, or I want to commit murder. Because in my brain, I know that I do not think I'm capable of committing those horrible acts. And if someone is capable of committing murder, like I said before, no matter what band or music genre they listen to, they are going to probably commit murder. Unfortunately, it's inevitably going to happen. Sometimes humans are a little fractured up there, and they do really bad things, regardless of outside influences, horror movies, music, blah, blah, blah. You guys know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of people can agree with that statement. And of course, I think a lot of people like to point the finger at moral influences. The problem with moral influences is that when it comes to morals or faith, it's an impossible argument to win. Because if someone a lot of people have different morals. What I think is right and wrong might be different from what you think is right and wrong. Some people think that capital punishment is okay and it's a moral thing to do. Other people do not. If you get these two people in a room, they're going to bicker and argue, and no resolution will come from that, because in their heads, they have the thought that this is right, you are wrong, or I am right, you are wrong. So a lot of people think, oh, well, it can cause kids to become satanic, pagans, all these kinds of things, which of course are nothing but moral arguments. They think that, well, these religions are terrible, therefore anything that influences my child to become that is also terrible. But of course, then you're implying that heavy metal makes people satanic, makes people pagan, or what have you. I've never heard anyone saying, oh, country music makes people Christian. I've never heard that argument come up. So it's a very gray area when it comes to morality influence. I really don't think that heavy metal has an influence on people's morality. It might open people's eyes up to different ways of thinking, but if you do not believe in Satanism and someone opens your mind to the concept of Satanism, if you think that is silly or asinine, no matter what someone tells you, you are still going to think it's silly and asinine, as long as you have somewhat of a iron mind, you aren't easily swayed. But unfortunately, there are people out there who are very easily swayed. You tell them something and they'll do it, but I don't think you can blame a band for someone else's weak will to commit these things, but it's hard to say. I also think it's quite interesting that no other type of music really gets the type of bad rap that metal gets when a fan of theirs commits something terrible. For example, like I was saying before, someone commits murder and they're a fan of Slayer, well, it's Slayer's fault. But, here in Toronto, gang violence is actually becoming a very serious thing. But I can't say I've heard any stories of, well, if they didn't listen to that gangster rap music, this wouldn't be happening. Because that's an asinine statement to make, and you'd be ridiculed for saying it. But it's perfectly fine to throw metal under the bus when it comes to that kind of thing. If some teenage girl were to enter the world of prostitution, and, would you ever hear someone say, well, she listened to Britney Spears and that's a very sexualized music, therefore that's why she became a prostitute. No, you will never hear something like that because it's a ridiculous thing to say. I'm not saying you should throw other genres of music under the bus like that. I'm just saying, how come they get a free pass where metal is the one getting the rap for murder, suicide, those kinds of things? Just some food for thought. Another thing I find quite interesting is when it comes to the idea of influence in metal in the media, that it is rarely ever anything positive. It's always something negative. For example, I've seen human interest stories of, Taylor Swift gets a tweet from a fan and then she ends up bringing them to prom, or Beyonce brings a fan on stage and lets them sing, and then these two people are glorified and put on a pedestal as these golden gods and humanitarians for being nice to their fans. And don't get me wrong, those are very nice things to do, but a lot of performers do that, including in heavy metal. I've never once heard a human interest story of, Iron Maiden played in Toronto and they brought a fan up on stage and how it made their day. Never once heard that story. Never once heard the story of the 15-year-old girl who was a colossal fan of Merciful Fate, and that's why she learned how to play guitar. Never heard that story. However, I have heard the story of a fan learning how to play acoustic guitar because they were a fan of Taylor Swift. It's clearly a media bias of what they choose to report and how they choose to spotlight certain people and shun or possibly even demonize others. It's just something very interesting that I don't know why they do it. Is it because these bands aren't, like metal bands aren't popular and deserve to be demonized and that's the way they do it? It's just weird to me, so let me know what you guys think of that one. Now, just a bit of a personal story before I wrap everything up here. I remember when I was in high school, I was a very big heavy metal fan then. But when I was in high school, I was actually a very good student. I never got in trouble with the law. I always got good grades. I always went to class, always got my homework done. I never did anything horrible or bad. But there was this one girl who was convinced that I was a morally bad person because I listened to heavy metal. And she put herself up on a pedestal because she was Catholic, and therefore she was morally superior to me. But she didn't really have anything to back that up because I never did anything wrong. I just listened to music that she viewed as immoral. And I specifically remember one time she was bragging to her friends that she got a fake ID and she went out drinking, used that fake ID to go out to bars and to go drinking. But, I guess the irony did not fall on her that what she did was breaking the law, and a lot of people would view what she did as very immoral. But I am the immoral person simply because I listen to heavy metal. So I remember that, and I just think it was so ironic and so fucking funny that this girl put herself on such a fucking moral pedestal simply because she didn't listen to heavy metal, but she would go out and commit legitimate crimes, but still have this, sloping her nose at people. I thought that was funny. But now I want to get your guys' opinion on this subject. Do you believe that heavy metal has a negative impact on people's lives? Or do you think it has a positive impact on people's lives? Or do you think it has zero impact or influence whatsoever? What do you think of the media's view of this? What do you think of the public's view of it? I'd love to get your guys' opinion on this subject. So, like my past videos, I'll be doing another album warning or an album recommendation, and today is another recommendation. The band is Ereb Altor, the album is Ulfven. This is an amazing band. The best way I can really describe them is like blackened Amon Amarth, if that makes sense, and even then, that's not a very good description. Either way, this is a great band, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. The album, once again, is Ulfven. Definitely check them out. So that's it for today's video. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe, but leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of today's video. Check out some of my past videos and share it with a few of your friends while you're at it. If you want to keep up with me on a more daily basis, you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. I also have a P.O. box open. All of that info is down in the description. I still have a handful of patches left, so if you'd like to get your very own, you can click right over here. There's also a link down in the description. Overall, thank you very much for watching, guys, and don't forget to stay brutal.